Welcome back to another reading and correcting of Stepping Up with me, Kendar, the Tiger Rates. Today we are doing chapter 63. His throat clamped shut with a painful croak. He's back, Val said. You could just crush him, Karen said. Yeah, Karen replied. You know what? I'm leaving it alone. I'm going to leave it to the editor. Tibs wished she did. He'd forgotten how much pain his body was in while he was at puberty. Once he'd been sitting before her again, the pain of getting the shadow had ceased to be. He opened an eye and looked up. The door was only twice his height away. He snickered, then stopped in pain. How had he been terrified of that fall? He'd thrown himself out of windows far higher in his attempt to have his audience with air. He struggled to his feet. The room was more cavern, with uneven walls and floor. His thinking felt clearer than before his audience. Maybe his time there had allowed him to rest. Maybe being in Purity's presence had healed him a little, although he was in too much pain still for that. Regardless, he was happy he wouldn't have to deal with whatever surprises this room had. He used the handholds the unevenness provided and climbed back to the door and the opening. What do you think you're doing? Karen demanded. Tibs didn't answer until he had pulled himself through and was catching his breath. His first attempt was only a hiss of air, accompanied by pain. He formed water in his mouth and had trouble Ooh. Oh! And that is a problem. I cannot have Tibs use his essence. Oh boy. There is no way I can bend the rules to allow it. Like allowing it and not playing off the consequence literally breaks the rule. And I don't want this. Oh boy. I mean, I can just go like this. All right, so that becomes. What do you think you're doing? Karen demanded. Tibbs didn't answer until he pulled himself through and was catching his breath. Leaving, he croaked, surprised his throat didn't hurt as much as he'd expected. Another effect of being in Purity's presence? He used the door to stand. You can't just let him leave, Karen said. He passed the test, Val replied. There was a forcefulness to the neutrality of her tone. She couldn't tell if she was hiding her anger or didn't want to show even a hint of pride. He worked hard, Purity took him, and judged him worthy. Who am I to pass judgment now? The dungeon he's in? Come on, no one will know. How sure of that are you, Karen? Val was quiet, and Tibs was too tired to do more than put one foot before the other. If she broke her rules, there was nothing Tibs could do to stop her. Do you think Rangar expected anyone to mind what he did until they came and killed him? She hadn't emphasized the them the way Danny did, but Tibs had the sense they were the same people. He was out of control. He wasn't listening to you anymore, and sorry, to you anymore. If they hadn't stopped him, his creatures would have been unleashed on the world. But how did they know he was about to do that? We didn't tell them. Sparky didn't. Not the way he felt about Rangar. Do you think he told anyone else? Farron was slow to answer. No, he didn't trust anyone but you, and that's only because of your bond. Farron and Val's voice faded as he walked, as if they stayed behind, discussing the other dungeon. The hall remained a hall, and when Tibs fell unconscious, he didn't wake to screams, just the pain and aches of his body, and not feeling any more rested. The dungeon didn't stop him or help. Val didn't even offer food. The idea of eating made Tibs sick. The trip back to daylight was shorter than that of his audience. It had to be. Not that Tibs was sure of anything. By the time the point of light was stronger than the dungeon's own. Then he was outside and the brightness blinded him. Arms closed around him, and he didn't care what they intended to do with him. Maybe they figured out he wasn't one of them and they would, I've caught you, the man whispered. A cell would have a cot where he could sleep properly. He'd take that. Show me your eyes. Finger took his chin and moved his head up. He prepared himself for the too intense light and opened them. The man's eye, with their non-color, turned sad. At least you came back, so you can try again. Ow. His throat closed up painfully as he was seated. More meditation and reflection. The man said, much as before. How long? He forced out through the pain. There's no way to know. You will. He looked over his shoulder. You mean how long you were in the dungeon? Tibbs nodded. Longer than anyone I have heard of. 24 days. He put a small cup in Tibbs's hand. 11 days ago is when we considered everyone who was going to have their audience to have returned. I admire how hard you tried, but respect that you recognize your limit and returned, even if it took so long. I'm sure that next time, Purity will take you in. Drink it slowly. It will help. The liquid was like syrup, but had no scent or taste. It coated his tongue and throat and soothed it, then his stomach. It didn't take his pain, thirst, or hunger away, but his mind cleared enough he realized why he had caused the main reaction. His eyes were still brown. It will be a while before someone's here to take you back, the man said. He no longer sounded like he was soothing Tim. He sounded like a man performing his duties now. As I said, we no longer expected anyone to come back at this point. Just wait here, and one of the clerics will take you to your chamber where you can rest fully. The man walked away. The man simply left him alone in the small room filled with plain and not too comfortable chairs. Of course, as far as he was concerned, Tibs wasn't an intruder, just another supplicant who hadn't gained his audience. Once his cup was empty, he stood and walked out of the door. He didn't even recall walking here from the dungeon. Men and women walked by, but no one even glanced his way. Tibs joined them, and after a couple of turns, he was on a larger path, then headed for the gate that marked the area reserved for the dungeon. The guard there didn't stop him. Outside, he received looks, and people gave him space. More to avoid smelling him, Tibs decided, than out of respect. His walk felt aimless, and sometimes he wondered why the dungeon had recreated a city around him. What the trap or puzzle could be he needed to overcome to proceed toward his audience. Then he remembered he had met Purity. He was out. He needed to go. It would come back to him. He looked around the marketplace, the smell both enticing and revolting. But the sights, those were familiar. He'd been here before. No, he'd come here to learn something, to learn the way back. He knew where he needed to go. The door opened and Zachariah took a step back, covering their nose, and their eyes grew wide in surprise. They smiled. He'd gotten it right on the first try. He'd found the right door even with the dungeon trying to confuse him. He made it, which was good, he decided, His darkness was right on his heel. No, it was right here. He barely felt Zachariah catch him before darkness was all he was. He woke in a bed that was too fancy and comfortable to be his. His pain was gone, as was his hunger or thirst. That felt wrong. He'd lived with both for so long that it was like those should be normal. How do you feel? Karina asked, and Tibbs opened his eyes. Strange. Where's the mountain that should have fallen on me? You returned, a man accused, and Tibbs looked at Paolo. You understand that I will not get you in a second time. Right, his eyes. We don't have the time anyway, Karina said, showing the bracelet with its still yellow gem. I'm surprised it didn't turn red already. Right, 2 and 4 days, plus however long he was asleep here. I know you thought purity was for you. Hey, oh, love. The other one's my own fault picking a name that's so close. Paolo said, his voice strained by restraint. But now you have to accept that what you want isn't always what's right. But now you have to accept that what you want isn't always what is right for you. Kept his confusion from showing as he nodded. Then the clerk laughed, and he looked at Karina. What is wrong with him? You came back. That didn't help. So they let the other leave. The guy who helped me from the dungeon seemed proud I decided to do that. He thought you were a supplicant. It's considered it. Paolo thinks I gave up. He thinks I wasn't determined enough to see it through or die trying. She shrugged. You aren't one of us. People who don't grow up as part of purity aren't as... She trailed off. She looked at the closed door, and Tibbs felt air essence shift. Did it work? I had my audience. I have all my essences. But if it did something, I can't feel it. I'm sorry. He shrugged. Water said I needed it. Maybe I need to do something more before I get whatever I'm supposed to. Or maybe there's nothing for me to get. He did say it would be hard. Maybe all I'm getting out of this is a little more of the essence, and I have to learn to deal with it. Since I know how to have an audience with her, I'll go to the lake and ask her what she needs me to do once we're back in Craggle Rock. Why are I need something to indicate that this is still Tibs. Why aren't I hungry or thirsty? How was I asleep? Only one day. It took it took me a lot of work to convince Paolo to heal you, she paused. I think he gave in because it means you'll leave sooner. He'd really rather I died, doesn't he? Don't be, she sighed. He's disappointed. I think he's angry he took a chance and he was wrong. I wish I could tell him you didn't just give up. What did you do while I was in the dungeon? He asked to change the subject. She brightened immediately. I spent time with my family. As disappointed as my mother was when I spent more time in the sorcerer's library than my meditation and preparing to become a cleric. Okay. This doesn't. I probably changed my mind in the middle of writing the line because as means there should be a den somewhere in there. There's disappointment. When I spent more time in the sorcerer's library in meditation, then my meditation and preparing to become a cleric was because he was afraid wow, that's a lot of was. All right. My mother's disappointment. Here. My mother's disappointment in me my mother's disappointment in you because she thought all the time I spent in the social library instead of on my meditation in order to be a cleric meant I was meant I showed an inclination to laziness. An inclination to laziness. She beamed when I told her I made it. Okay, there we go. That's way better. She brightened immediately. I spent time with my family. My mother's disappointment in me was because she thought all that time I spent in the sorcerer's library, instead of my meditation and preparing to become a cleric, here meant I showed an inclination to laziness. She beamed when I told her I made a row in only a few months. They don't use levels here, do they? Or Karina shook her head. But they do know they have to know about them because clerics will go to other dungeons as part of their training. I'm glad your time waiting was good. I'm glad Paolo forced me to go. I didn't realize it would be this easy to fix it. I was terrified that I'd try and they'd find out and I'd find out they hated me. It's better to try to fix things, she said. We're runners, so we might die before we can if we wait too long. He studied her. Do you want to stay? She ran a finger over the yellow gem. I can't. When I'm recalled, I have to go. I mean, until then, Tibs said. I'm going back as soon as I get out of bed. Oh, I don't want to spend more time there. Don't you want to spend more time resting? He rolled his eyes. What I want is food. After the ways the dungeon tortured me with tables full of this stuff, I want real food, made by one of Krosef's brothers. You have to take it easy when eating, Tibs. You might. I'm fine. And I am going to eat all the food at the inn. A soft knock interrupted Karina's protest. Zacharias stepped in with a tray. Stepped in, carrying. This is, something that we will often do with because when speaking, we'll do that. We'll shortcut. And we're so used to it that we understand it. In writing, because we're seeing it, it gets clunky. Zakira stepped in, carrying, and also with carries the right information overall, but it's not as precise. Carrying a tray with a couple of slices of bread, meats, and cheeses, along with a tankard on it. Along with a tankard. I hope I'm not interrupting a special moment. She looked from one to the other meaningfully. But Tibs could use something to eat after his experience. Karina stood. I'll go give my proper goodbyes and we can leave once I'm back. Are you sure? Tibs asked. My family will understand. Tibs nodded and took the tray from Zachariah. Tibs rubbed his stomach and did his best not to show the pain. Told you to take it easy, Karina said, chuckling. It'll pass. Tibs winced and slowed his pace. Eating the food Zachariah brought him had rekindled his hunger, and they had been happy to feed him more and more. Karina had taken longer than Tibs expected to return, and had definitely overeaten as a result. You think you're going to be sick? We should stop at a tavern until it passes. We don't have to go back to Craggle Rock this instant. It's just emotion pushing the food around, he replied. Zach's too soft, she said. I'm hungry. And how hungry are you now? I'm hoping to walk to the platform. From the platform to the inn will make me hungry again, so I get to enjoy their food. She looked at him and shook her head, chuckled as they stepped onto the line to get to the platform. The long wait helped settle his stomach. Then, as the assistant stood next to them and made the motion to take them back, he was concentrated on sensing something new he could pick up. There was nothing new. It was all tingling and this indistinct essence moving around. It wasn't until that went away and Crackalock materialized around them that there was something new. The pain was new. Being shoved back by an arrow in his shoulder, that was new too. Tibs screaming in pain as he fell back, that wasn't entirely new. And this concludes chapter 63 of Stepping Up. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next one is going to be, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read the whole story, it is available for free on Royal Road. If you want to support me and read ahead of the story, that is on my Patreon. And I make no promises, but my coffee should be set up with this story by then. If you want to listen to me do these live, stumble my way through them, that's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. All the links are in the notes. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.